Welcome to this video on the online permit revalidation process for LAA aircraft. There are 3 simple steps to completing this process. First step is the owner selects their inspector from a drop-down list on the LAA website. When they've done that, the inspector is instantly notified to complete an airworthiness review. Once the inspector has completed their airworthiness review, the owner is instantly notified to complete their declarations and payment. And once those 3 steps are complete, the application is sent immediately to LAA headquarters for review and issue. The first step is to log in to the LAA website. To do this, you head to the home page and then click on the button at the top left which says Login or Register. When you do that, you'll be asked to type your username and password. If you're not sure what these are, then contact the LAA office and they can help you find out your details. Once you've logged in, you should be able to see a dashboard which has an orange button that shows My Aircraft Data. So to move forward, you need to click on that orange button. For this video, we're going to be using the aircraft GABCD. First of all, click on the button that says Apply for Revalidation. If you're trying to revalidate early, then a pop-up will come up asking you if you want to date shift your permit. On this video, I'm going to say yes. If your aircraft's approved for night and/or IFR flying, the first question will ask you if you want to keep this privilege. In this case, I'm going to click yes. Next, you select your inspector from the drop-down list on the screen. This is a smart drop-down list, so you can only select inspectors that are authorised to look at your specific type of aircraft. So for today's example, we're going to use Bob Boyd. Once you've done that, you click the Apply button, and that is the first stage complete. This will immediately send an email to your inspector to ask them to complete an airworthiness review. As a reminder, make sure you've spoken to your inspector first before you select them from the drop-down list so they know what to expect. As an LAA inspector, you will get presented with a dashboard. 3 of the buttons on this dashboard are orange. That's My Aircraft Data, Search Aircraft Data, and My Revalidations. If you're an aircraft owner, you will have data for your particular aircraft under My Aircraft Data, but the 2 buttons that are important to you as an inspector are Search Aircraft Data and My Revalidations. Once an owner has selected you as their inspector for their permit revalidation, you will automatically be sent an email to notify you. Therefore, when you log in and click the orange button, My Revalidations, you will see a list of the different aircraft that are ready for you to inspect. Today, as we're using GABCD, I'm going to click the Submit Inspection button for ABCD. You may not want to use a computer or mobile phone while you're completing an inspection. For example, if you're at a farm strip with poor phone signal. To help you, we've created this crib sheet. If you answer all the questions on here, you will have all the information you need to complete the online form back at home. An important point to note is you cannot submit this in place of the online form. It's purely there to help you out on the airfield on the day. So, back to the online form. There are a number of stages for you to complete. You can save the form using the button at the bottom left at any stage if you need to look up some more information and come back later. The first section of the form asks you about the airframe hours. It will give you the number of hours at the last revalidation inspection and ask if this is correct. If this is not correct, you have the option to submit the correct number of hours. You'll then ask for the number of hours at this year's revalidation inspection. The next question asks you what engine type is fitted and whether this has been replaced or changed since the last revalidation inspection. If it has been changed or replaced, then you'll be asked to submit details of the manufacturer and model of the new engine fitted. The next question asks you about the propeller and whether this has been changed since the last revalidation. If you click yes, it will ask you for details of the manufacturer, model, diameter and pitch of that new propeller. The next question asks you whether the propeller fitted is on the aircraft operating limitations document. The owner should have a copy of the operating limitations document for their aircraft. Here is an example of an operating limitations document. They're usually A5 laminated sheets. At the top right is a list of the propellers that are allowed. Here you can see the original propeller, a Sensnich type, and also here is the LAA propeller type list or PTL list. Any propeller listed on the PTL list could be fitted to this aircraft as well. The The final question in this section asks whether the hours have been correctly recorded in the aircraft, engine and variable pitch propeller logbooks. So for correctness, the airframe logbook is blue, the engine logbook is grey, and if the aircraft is fitted with an in-flight variable pitch propeller, it will also have a yellow logbook. The next section of the form is about work, modifications and repairs that have happened in the last year. The first question in this section asks whether any of the following have been carried out. That's work not covered by the aircraft maintenance programme and work outside of pilot authorised maintenance. For more information on these, head to Technical Leaflet 2.00, which takes you through the system for validating your permit to fly. Technical Leaflet 2.19, which covers the generic maintenance schedule, and Technical Leaflet 2.05, which contains a list of tasks that are covered in pilot maintenance. If you answer yes to this question, a text box will appear allowing you to give more detail about what's happened in the last year. The second question asks whether any unapproved modifications or repairs have been carried out to the aircraft. As an inspector, you have access to details on all the aircraft in the LAA database. If you click the button here to go to Search Aircraft Data, you can search for any aircraft registration and find out the modifications and repairs that we know about for that aircraft. Therefore, if a modification or repair is not on that list, you know that we haven't approved it. The next section asks you about the aircraft maintenance programme. Some of our aircraft have a predefined aircraft maintenance programme. For example, night and IFR approved aircraft, four-seaters, glider tugs and other complex types. If this is the case, then this top field will be filled in already with the aircraft maintenance programme that must be followed. As an inspector, you need to check whether this has been followed and signed off. If the aircraft does not have a predefined maintenance schedule, then this text box will be free for you to type in the title of the maintenance programme that's agreed between yourself and the aircraft owner. Once you've done this, there are a few declarations for you to make about the aircraft maintenance programme, whether it's adequate for the aircraft, whether the maintenance has been carried out as per the programme, and whether the maintenance has been accomplished within this airworthiness review period and signed by you as an LAA inspector. Once you complete this, we'll move on to a section about compliance with the approved design. The first question asks whether the aircraft conforms to the right TADS for the type. This question will give both the TADS number and the latest issue number. In this case, we've got TADS 950 because the aircraft we're using is a Chipmunk. If you think there is any error with this TADS number, then you can click No and type the TADS number and issue that you have used. The next question asks whether all mandatory placards and marking are correctly installed in the aircraft and legible. In order to know which placard should be fitted, you need to refer to the operating limitations document, as shown here. Section 2 will give you a list of limitations which either need to be displayed as placards or instrument markings. For example, here you can see there are placards for aerobatic limitations, loading limitations and engine limitations. The second bullet point asks if placards are installed in accordance with Technical Leaflet 2.11. This means that you need to see that there's a placard saying that the aircraft is not certified to an international requirement. The final question in this section is about a ballistic parachute recovery system. If the aircraft is fitted with a ballistic parachute recovery system, then we need to check that that has been recorded on GINFO, the CAA's database. Now we move on to the section about service life limited components. The first question asks whether there are any service life limited components fitted to this aircraft. As we are looking at a Chipmunk, there are various fatigue lives attributed to different components which would need to be considered. The second question in this section asks if your engine is running on condition. By operating on condition, we mean the engine is operating beyond the manufacturer's listed time before overhaul. Now we move on to the section for additional documentation. This section will only appear if the aircraft type requires additional documents to be uploaded. In the case of a Chipmunk, we would need a copy of the roll factor certificate, the Form C and the fatigue index statement. These can be easily uploaded in various forms to this section. The defects section asks whether any defects have been rectified at this time or deferred in a controlled manner. To help you with this, the LAA publishes a deferred defects log. An example of a deferred defect could be some paint flaking on the engine cowling that needs to be rectified before the next permit revalidation. Then we move on to the section regarding compliance with airworthiness directives, mandatory permit directives and mandatory technical directives. Airworthiness directives are published by the State of Registry or other bodies. These are legally mandatory for all aircraft that used to be certified. CAA mandatory permit directives are the permit equivalent of an airworthiness directive. They are legally mandatory for permit aircraft. To find these, you head to the CAA website and look for mandatory permit directives. With mandatory permit directives, older ones are listed in a PDF of CAP 661, or more recent ones are found listed individually on the CAA website. All LAA aircraft have one mandatory permit directive that applies to them. This is MPD 1998-019-R1, and it's in relation to flexible fuel tubing. So this should be in the pink pages for all LAA aircraft. The next question asks about LAA technical directives. These are found on the LAA website. Head to the engineering page on the LAA website and click Continuing Airworthiness Information. Once you've clicked through, it takes you to the Information Library section on airworthiness information. Here you'll find all our alerts, technical service bulletins and mandatory technical directives. You can search for a particular aircraft type. For example, you could type Chipmunk in here, or you can search on the year. As we're using a Chipmunk in this example, if I type in Chipmunk, we then open that up, it looks like this and gives you instructions on how to complete the mandatory technical directive. This needs to be recorded in the aircraft's logbook in the white pages, signed off by yourself as an inspector, and recorded in the pink pages as complete. Once you've done that, you could then tick the mandatory technical directives box on the form. The final question on this section asks about continuing airworthiness compliance or logbook pink pages. We expect LAA aircraft to have the pink and green pages filled in at the back of their logbooks. Here's an example. In this case, this is the pink page for repetitive requirements. These are signed off each year or at a particular time frame as required. There are other pink pages for one-off requirements, modifications, and a list of those requirements that do not apply to this type of aircraft. The green pages should include a list of the main maintenance entries. So, for example, the inspection for a permit revalidation, a 50-hour or 100-hour inspection. An alternative to using the pink pages is to create a compliance statement, for example, using Microsoft Excel, then printing this out, signing it and stapling it into the back of the logbook. Now we move on to the weight and balance report. Here you need to fill in the date that the aircraft was last weighed. We strongly recommend that all LAA aircraft are weighed every 10 years or when there's any significant change, for example, if the aircraft gets repainted. As an inspector, you also need to confirm that the aircraft was last weighed in the same configuration that the aircraft is now. Now we move on to the documentation review. In this section, there are a number of documents listed that you need to make sure you have seen. First of all is the Certificate of Registration, which will look something like this. It will have the aircraft registration, type, serial number, and the name and address of the registered owner. Next is the Permit to Fly. This is a document issued by CAA. Here is an example Permit to Fly. The Permit to Fly also shows the registration, aircraft type, and serial number. The next document is the Operating Limitations or EASA Permit to Fly conditions. The operating limitations we looked at earlier, but here's an image for a reminder. This contains all the information on limitations and placards, which we touched on before. Alternatively, some aircraft will have Permit to Fly conditions from EASA. The next question asks whether you've seen the Avionics Installation Approval Certificate or AD917. This looks like this. It will list the different avionics equipment installed and the approval number under which it was done. This is not required for handheld radios. Then it will ask you to look at the airframe and engine logbooks. As discussed earlier, these are the blue and grey logbooks. We'll then ask for the yellow propeller logbook for in-flight variable pitch propellers only. Then it asks for the flight manual or pilot operating handbook and supplements. So, for example, for a Chipmunk, we've got the pilot's notes here and also the flight manual. Some LAA aircraft won't have these documents, so you can click Not Applicable. The last document asked for on this section is the Aircraft Maintenance Programme. Some aircraft have predefined maintenance programmes, for example a Chipmunk. Other types, you will have come up with the maintenance programme between you and the owner. It is expected that the maintenance programme will be printed off each year, filled in and signed. If the aircraft is approved for night and/or IFR flying and the owner wants to keep it that way, you as the inspector will have to answer a number of questions. First of all, you're asked whether the equipment list is current and that all the required equipment in that list is functional. Next, you are asked if the electrical power system remains as declared in the initial application. Then you are asked if the system software has been maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. Then you're asked if the avionics checks are in date, so this means the checks of the radio and the transponder, and that any changes made to the aircraft have been approved by LAA Engineering. The changes that need LAA Engineering approval for night and/or IFR aircraft are covered in Technical Leaflet 2.27. These changes are more extensive than those that do normal VFR flying. The final question asks whether the tailored maintenance schedule remains appropriate. For night IFR aircraft, this schedule is predefined. Therefore, the owner should have provided you with a copy. If you do not have a copy, please ask LAA Engineering for assistance. Now we move on to the section about the physical survey and comments. In this section, you'll be asked to give the date that the physical survey was carried out and the location. You'll also be given the option to write any comments you have about the aircraft itself. These will be stored on the database and also sent to you and the aircraft owner at the end, for everybody to be able to see any comments that you make. Last but not least, we come to the inspector declaration. In this section, you're asked to confirm that all of the aircraft's records and documents have been reviewed for the period identified, that the aircraft is found to be fully compliant with all of the requirements in the applicable airframe TADs, and that you have signed a permit maintenance release in the aircraft logbooks in respect of this permit to fly revalidation inspection. Once you click accept, you'll be taken to a preview of the whole application. Here you can review all of your answers and check they're correct. You have the option to edit any that you want to change. Once the inspector has completed their airworthiness review, an email is instantly sent to the owner, asking them to complete their declarations and payment. In order to do this, the owner needs to log back into the LAA website and head to My Aircraft Data. They will now see that this button has appeared saying Continue Revalidation. When they click on that button, they're asked to submit the date of the most recent airworthiness check flight. With this online system, we've made some changes to the requirements for check flights. Most LAA aircraft will now require a check flight at a maximum of 3 years rather than 1 year. There are some exceptions to this, as covered in Technical Leaflet 2.00. A further change is that check flight schedules will not be reviewed regularly by LAA headquarters. A pro forma for a check flight will be available on the LAA website, and we would expect to find this document completed in your aircraft paperwork should we do an audit. Please note that if your aircraft certificate of validity expired more than 2 years ago, then LAA Engineering will need to review your check flight. Next, the main aircraft owner is asked to confirm that their syndicate details are correct. If these details are not correct, then please contact the LAA office to change them. In order to submit your application, all members of a syndicate need to be current members of the Light Aircraft Association. If the membership of one of the members has expired, please ask them to renew their membership on the LAA website. And this is the final page for owners to complete. The revalidation fee is pre-populated based on the weight of the aircraft, and then owners need to agree to a number of declarations. Once owners have agreed to the declarations, they're then asked to submit their card details for payment. The aircraft owner is then notified that their application has been successful and is being reviewed by LAA Engineering. They can keep up to date with the progress of their application by heading to My Aircraft Data. There is a link on the page here. That was a review of the 3 steps for the online permit revalidation system. We hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, then please get in touch with us at LAA Engineering.